Shavua Tov. Here is a summary of some of the things we talked about on this Shabbat. It was very hot, so the drasha was half of the usual length. So we'll do a little bit of other things as well in this video. And there will be a very valuable trick to go into Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur to help us achieve the successful, good, blessed, healthy, safe year that we hope to have. There are a number of declarations in our parasha. The first one is when somebody brings their first fruits, and they have to read certain psukim. And the second one was they bring their maaser sheni to Yerushalayim. They have to recite a certain confessional. And declarations are very important psychologically. They help us to fulfill. When we make a public commitment, nobody likes to be called a hypocrite. When we make a public commitment, we like to stick to our public commitments. Unlike a certain government person, I don't even remember who it was, who promulgated a rule, no weddings in the corona time, and then a few days later there he was at a wedding. Embarrassing. What can you do? Declarations generally work, and we want to make declarations, specific declarations that will help us to be strong, to live according to the way we know that we should in the coming year. The most impressive declaration, though, was the one on the two mountains, Mount Gerizim and Mount Eval, in the area of Shechem, where half the tribes went up on Mount Gerizim to bless the people, and half went on to Mount Eval to represent the mountain, to be on the mountain of the curse, as the Torah says. And that was a very big declaration. And the question is, what was the significance of it? It reminded me immediately of the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, where there is a mountain and there was an acceptance of the Torah. Here too, there are two mountains and there was an acceptance of the Torah. We talk about changes that take place in holiness in the land of Israel. That the land of Israel was sanctified twice. The first time was when Joshua and the tribes conquered it. The second time was when Ezra and Nehemiah led the resettling and the sanctification of the land in the times of the beginning of the Second Temple period. The Rambam says that the first sanctity of the land did not last because it was done through conquest, and conquest only maintains its effect as long as the conqueror remains strong and in charge. As soon as the conqueror disappears, things return to their previous state. However, the second sanctity, done by the time of Ezra, was done through the process of chazakah, of internal change. It grew from within the people and the land. That kind of a sanctity will last forever because it is not forced by some external person or groups of people using the threat of violence, but rather it is from the true innate desire of the people. And therefore, says the Rambam, the second sanctity of Eretz Yisrael remained, and it is holy to this day from the times of Ezra and Nehemiah straight through. And that may be why we have two Rosh Hashanahs. The first one is the beginning of the month of Nisan, which is the first of the months of the year. Why do we need a second Rosh Hashanah on the first of Tishrei, half a year later? Because the beginnings are not always successful. We're inspired, we're happy, we're optimistic, and then reality kicks in and we sort of forget, we get distracted, we go off to the side. And so therefore we need a corrective Rosh Hashanah, once again to repent, to get back on the path, that this time it's coming from our own selves, not just because we were overwhelmed by the power of the miracles of Pesach, but now it's coming from us. We wish to make the changes. We wish to have the growth, and therefore that second Rosh Hashanah works. And so too with the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai the first time, it didn't really work so well because there was a golden calf 40 days later. There had to be a second giving of the Torah on Yom Kippur. But I think the second acceptance of the Torah was this ceremony of the two mountains, because these two ceremonies are opposites. The one at Mount Sinai, the people were below, and only the leaders went up on the mountain. Moses to the highest place, and Aaron and the Kohanim came a little closer, and so forth. So here at Mount Gerizim and Mount Eval, the whole people went up, half on Mount Gerizim, half on Mount Eval. And the leaders were dafka down in the valley in between, and they were the ones who did the speaking. They talked from below, and the people on the mountain answered Amen. Whereas at Mount Sinai, it was God and Moses speaking from above, and the people were listening passively. So here again, you see the people are taking the center stage. And I think maybe the number of things that were said is perhaps the most significant as well. At Mount Sinai, there were 10 commandments. 10 is the number that God prefers. The Mishnah says that God created the world with 10 utterances. There were 10 plagues. The number 10, according to the Maharal, symbolizes unity in multiplicity. It's a multiple, it's a number not with one item, but with 10 items, but 10 is a unit. In Hebrew, the yud is the smallest letter, it's a little dot. to signify that all of the diverse aspects of creation are all created by one unified creator, the letter Yud, which is the first letter of the name of God. So the number 10 is God's number. God was the boss at the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. How many curses, how many arurs were there at Har Gerizim and Har Eval? 12. The number of the Jewish people, 12 tribes. And so therefore we see that this acceptance, when it comes from us, is the most important. And the declarations that we make from us are the most important. Therefore, I always recommend every year for Rosh Hashanah for each individual to make a declaration, what their hopes are, what they hope to achieve, how they hope to be better, and to use this declaration in our tefillah, to ask God, please help me to fulfill this declaration, X, Y, Z, whatever it will be, and not just to say it until Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, but to say it the whole year long, to keep us on that trail, on that path. So that's what we talked about on Shabbos. We kept it short because of the heat. So I'll add a couple of other things. There was a question about blowing the shofar, if it's permissible to put a cover on the end of the shofar to protect droplets which might be infected, Chalila, if the tokea has the virus, God forbid. So we discussed, first of all, in our Beit Knesset, we will be doing the Tikiyat Shofar with God's help outdoors and keeping distance, so there shouldn't be a problem to begin with. But the question is it allowed to do that if we would decide to do that? So there is a very interesting law by shofar, that is, it's not just by shofar, it's by many things, that's called Ein Kategor Naaseh Sanegor. The prosecutor cannot become the defense. We see this in the case, for example, of Yom Kippur. The Kohen Gadol is not allowed to go into the Holy of Holies wearing his golden garments. Why? Because gold is half of the equation of the golden calf. Therefore, the gold reminds of the sin of the golden calf, and therefore that's the prosecution. And it's not appropriate that the prosecution should now become the defense, where the Kohen Gadol is attempting to atone for the sin of the golden calf and for the sins of the people in the Holy of Holies. So therefore, he has to take off the golden garments before he goes in. So too, on Rosh Hashanah, we are not allowed to use a shofar taken from a cow. Why? Because, again, cow is the other half of the golden calf. And even though the blowing of the shofar takes place outside of the Holy of Holies, the rabbis say that the sound is so powerful that it is reminding God of the covenant and of things past and of his promises. It also has the ability to transport us into the Holy of Holies, and therefore it's not appropriate to use a shofar from a cow, which is connected to the golden calf, because the prosecutor cannot become the defense. Now, there's an interesting law that says that one, under certain specific circumstances, may cover their shofar with gold, put a gold leaf on top of it. They may not put the gold inside. You won't fulfill the mitzvah with that. Why? Because when the person blows it, they're not blowing the shofar, they're blowing the gold that's on the inside. They cannot put the gold over the mouthpiece, because then there is what's called a Hatzitsa, or an interposition between the blower and the shofar. The blower has to touch the shofar directly. But if the gold is put on the back part of the shofar, so then it is possible that they can fulfill the mitzvah. If the gold is not too heavy and does not change the sound of the shofar, then we can fulfill the mitzvah. If the gold is too heavy and it changes the sound, we're not yotze, we don't fulfill. Why? Because then you're not hearing just the shofar, you're hearing the shofar plus some other factor, and that's not what we need. We need to hear the pure sound of the shofar. The question is, what about Ein Kategor Naaseh Sanegor? It's gold. So the answer is, when the rabbis made the blessing of the shofar, they were very careful to choose the phraseology, lishmoa kol shofar, to hear the sound of the shofar. In other words, it is not the physical shofar that is the main thing. Yes, we need to have a physical shofar to create the sound, but the fulfillment is by hearing the sound. And therefore, if the gold is not changing the sound of the shofar, I'm not hearing the sound of the gold, there's no problem with Ein Kategor Naaseh Sanegor, because I'm only hearing the sound of the pure shofar. The fact that there is gold on top of it doesn't make a difference. But anyway, on halachic level, because we see that gold, if the gold is changing the tone of the shofar, we're not fulfilling the mitzvah, so too it would seem that if one were to put a covering on the end of the shofar, and that covering would change the sound of the shofar, then we couldn't do that, we wouldn't fulfill the mitzvah. If the covering would be very light and it would sound more or less identical before and after, then one could do it. But as I said, what we will do in our Beit Knesset is we will keep a strong distance, and we're doing it outdoors, so that there should not be any problem. One other thing from last week, there was one of the Shailot HaShavua that I really loved, that I thought was fun, and I want to share with you. In Parashat Shoftim, we read that when a person violates a prohibition of the Torah, they get what's called malkot, or whipping. How many lashes are they to receive? The Torah says 40. However, there's an argument in the rabbis, does 40 mean 40? Or is this the new math where 40 means 39? Like, when they sell something not for $100, they sell it for 99. So is 40 really meaning 39? It's not the same thing at all, but I just brought that to connect. So the first Tana, we call him Tana Kama. He says, Arba'im chaser achat, 40 minus 1. It's 39 lashes. Rabbi Yehuda says he gets 40 lashes. That when the Torah says 40, it means 40. So if somebody violated any lo ta'aseh, any thou shalt not in the Torah, they get, according to Tanakama, 39 hits, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, 40. So when the Chidushei Harim, a great rabbi, was eligible to be married, the prospective parents of a bride sent a rabbi to test him in his Torah knowledge. And the rabbi asked him, can you give me a situation where both Rabbi Yehuda and Tanakama would decide that somebody who had sinned receives the exact same amount of lashes? So, he could have answered, I was thinking that he could have answered that if they're giving him, the lashes and the person is all of a sudden ill and unable to receive more and in danger of death, and they would stop early. Maybe that. But the Chidushei Harim had a much more brilliant answer than that. He said, I'll tell you how. Let's say we have a person, we'll call him Russia. Russia violated 39 negative commandments in the Torah, so he has to get 39 sets of lashes. Rabbi Yehuda will say, since each set must be 40, so he gets 39 times 40, which is 1,560. Tanakama would say he would get 1,521. Why? Because Tanakama says that each set of lashes is only 39, so it would be 39 times 39, whereas Rabbi Yehuda would say 39 times 40. So far we haven't answered the question, except we need one more detail. What is Rasha's new job that he just got? He just got a new job, and his job was working for the court, giving lashes. And he had one client to whom he gave lashes. How many lashes did he give that one client? 40. So according to Tanakama, who says he has to give only 39, he gave one too many. And by giving one too many, he violated the prohibition of lo tosif, of not adding on to the mitzvahs of the Torah. So therefore, according to the Tanakama, when he gave that 40th lash, he violated his 40th prohibitions. That's 40 times 39, 1,560. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, when he gave that new client the 40th lash, according to Rabbi Yehuda, he did exactly what he was supposed to do, and therefore it doesn't add on to the 39 sins that he had done prior to entering that job. He gets only 39 times 40, 1,560. Enjoy figuring that out. It took me a while, but it was fun. Shavua Tov.